In last week's Dvar Torah on Parshat Hayeh Sarah, so we spoke about Yishmael possibly doing teshuvah, because the verse says that after Avraham died, Yitzchak and Yishmael bury Avraham, and Rashi notes, based on Chazal, that if you look at the order, Yitzchak is put before Yishmael, so Yishmael is recognizing that Yitzchak was the main son, is the primary heir of Avraham, and once Yishmael realizes this, there's actually a teshuvah process with Yishmael. Okay, so today, B'ezrat Hashem, at the very end of this Dvar Torah, maybe we'll get a little bit to Parashat Toledot, to this week's parasha, but I want to go back to Yishmael. Have one more Dvar Torah about Yishmael and the Yishmael and the Jewish people, the big machloket that goes through generations. And maybe we're going to see, because I started looking into this a little bit more after last week, and it's not so clear that everyone necessarily agrees with that previous Rashi. It's not so clear that Rashi himself agrees with that previous Rashi, that it's the only opinion that Yishmael is going to do teshuvah at the end of days, or that the teshuvah is going to be a lasting teshuvah. And let's maybe look at some other sources that might have a different approach. We're going to be focusing primarily on the very last pasuk in Parshat Hayeh Sarah. We'll get to it in a second. Also, B'ezrat Hashem, there's a question that's been bothering me for a while, because we know with the whole war going on right now, we've been dealing with Hamas. We've been dealing with these terrible Hamasnikim, and Hamas is a word that we already learned. We learned it at the beginning of Parshat Noach, with all the evil that took place at the end of Bereshit, that God has to destroy the world because man became so evil, because they were raping and they were murdering and they were stealing. And the word Hamas signifies this violence, symbolizes, as Rashi said, stealing just for the sake of stealing, just to be evil. So I was wondering, maybe there could be a stronger Yishmael-Hamas connection. In the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to see, how do we get from Yishmael to Hamas? And B'ezrat Hashem, in this Dvar Torah, we're going to try to give one approach to that connection. And then B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to have one more Dvar Torah with a second approach to the Yishmael-Hamas connection. Okay, but let's go now to the end of last week's parasha. Let's go to the very last aliyah. Now, the very last aliyah, so we said Avram had just died, and Yishmael and Yitzchak bury Avraham, and as Rashi said over there, Yishmael does teshuvah, and then the pasuk says, it goes through Yishmael's lineage, and it says, these are the children, this is Ve'ele Toledot Yishmael, this is the line of Yishmael ben Avraham, Asher Yodah Hagar Mitzrit, Shivchat Sarah Avraham, who's from the son of Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's Shivcha, Sarah's servant. So we see over here that Yishmael is still recognizing that he comes from the servant side, he's not the main son, and then it goes on, and it begins to list the different names of Yishmael. Yishmael himself is going to have unbelievable, beautiful, strong tribes. And it speaks about how his Bechor, Nevayot, and his second son, Kedar, and Aben Adabel, and different names of his sons. And actually, I was reading in the commentaries, they say that the first two sons, Nevayot and Kedar, they're going to be like the more powerful ones. We're going to find them later on in the Nach. We're going to see things about them. And then when you get to the Rishonim, you get to the Rambam, Maimonides, in his Garrett Teiman and other places, they start to speak about Kedar, the second son, being a little more of a crazy one. If you open up in Yeshayahu Perek Kaf Aleph Pasuk Yud Zayin, it actually speaks about Bnei Kedar being the Giborei Keshet. They're the ones that go with the bow and arrow. And we already mentioned in the past that Yishmael, what do we know? Yishmael, he's the guy with the bow and arrow that shoots indiscriminately. He's shooting at Yitzchak, Metzachek, laughing, shooting arrows, shooting zikim, fireballs, crazy Rashi we spoke about in a previous Dvar Torah. But it seems that this whole idea of shooting out the rockets, shooting out the arrows in the son of Kedar, that appears to be where it's going to follow to. And actually, if you open up Yonatan ben Uziel, the Targum, the translation into Aramaic by Yonatan ben Uziel, so he translates on our pasuk, when it says the word Kedar, he writes down Arav. Arab meaning the Arabs, the Arab world, they come from Kedar, so already beginning to notice a little bit of a connection. Although I did see that there are some notes on our Yonatan ben Uziel saying maybe that there's an issue with the actual text, but in the standard Yonatan ben Uziel, it says that Kedar actually refers to Arab, refers to the Arabs. That's the son of Yishmael. Yishmael had many sons, and this is the one that we've been dealing with the most. And then pasuk goes on; it speaks about the rest of his sons. They're going to turn into be 12 Shnemasar Nisiim the Umotam. They're going to be 12 chieftains with many tribes. So similar to how we're going to have our 12 tribes, they're going to break off to these great families. So too Yishmael is going to break off into great families. He's going to live a nice life of 137 years, says the parasha. And then the very last pasuk in last week's parasha states as follows: Vayishkenu michavila ad Shur, and they're going to dwell from Chavila unto Shur. Asher al pnei Mitzrayim boacha Ashur. They're going to go from the area close to Egypt all the way up to Ashur. Now we're thinking about how you go up from Egypt. We're going to go up up to Egypt through Gaza. You know, these Yishmaelim are Bedouins. They're traveling everywhere. They can go all the way up to Ashur, up in the far north. They're going to get a lot of land. And then the pasuk closes off. Al Penei Kol Echav Nafal. And upon all of his brothers, all of his kin, all the people that are next to him, Nafal, he's going to fall. Now, what in the world does that mean? Al Penei Kol Echav Nafal. Like, what does that mean? So I see in an English translation they translate nafal as like, and he camped, that they're going to be dwelling. They have so much land, they're going to be everywhere. But the language seems a little more sinister because it says, on top of all of his brothers, he's going to fall. So when we start getting into the commentators, they begin to notice that maybe there's something a little bit deeper going on over here. Okay, so what does it mean that he falls on all of his brothers? So most commentators go in the direction, they take us back to when the angel blessed Hagar. We spoke about weeks ago, when the angel blessed Hagar, that when she was pregnant, they says, no, don't worry, you're going to have a child, everything is going to be great, except your child's going to be a little bit difficult to deal with. And says the angel to Hagar, V'hu yiyeh pere Adam, and he's going to be a wild-ass man. Yado bakol ve'yad kol bo, his hand's going to be in everybody, and everyone's hand's going to be in him. And then it says, Ve'al penei kol echav yishkon, and in the face of all of his brothers, he's going to dwell. So very similar to our pasuk, but instead of the word nafal, that he's going to be like falling onto, nafal is falling, to land on, to fall on, it says the language of yishkon, to dwell. So based on that, many of the commentators, including Rashi by us, is going to tell us that the word nafal means shachan. It means to dwell. He's going to dwell everywhere. So learn it very nicely. He's going to be able to dwell in all areas. Okay, awesome. But then Rashi goes on, and Rashi says, how come over here by us, the pasuk says a language of nefilah, of falling, which is got a negative connotation. And earlier on, we had a language of yishkon, like dwelling, a much nicer connotation. So why flip the language? Just use the same language in both places. Either say nafal in both places, or say yishkon in both places. Why the change in language? So Rashi is actually quoting a midrash. There's a midrash in Bereshit Rabbah in two places, in Bereshit Rabbah in Memhei, as well as Bereshit Rabbah Samech Bet. So you have it in 45 as well as in 62. You're going to find the midrash Rabbah there expands upon this, but says Rashi, quoting the first half of it, Ad shelo met Avraham yishkon. Until Avram died, as long as Avram was alive, we have the language of yishkon. But after Avram died, we have the language of nafal. So a change happens in Yishmael. And now on the surface level, it sounds like the change went from good to more negative. So we spoke last week about Yishmael doing teshuvah. It appears from this midrash that the rabbis who wrote this midrash might be arguing on the earlier rabbis, or something might have changed along the way, and maybe Yishmael did teshuvah right when Avram died, but as time went on, either he or maybe his descendants, I'm not sure, it's not so clear from these midrashim, is it speaking specifically about Yishmael, or maybe is it just a symbol for Bnei Yishmael, his kids in the future, that they're gonna promise in the future. So I actually want to get back to the midrash in a second, open the actual midrash where it actually does have a pretty negative connotation. But I saw some of the commentators on Rashi, they want to try to work out these two Rashis. Did Yishmael do teshuvah or did he not do teshuvah? So if you open up the Kli Yakar, he's gonna say no, look at the language. In the language of nafal, of falling, it's in past tense, and meaning Yishmael had already fallen, but now he does teshuvah. And they say the chronology is off. Yishmael does teshuvah after Avram dies. So don't worry, it's still going to be good. I also saw a nice idea that nafal means that to fall could also mean like to humble yourself, to fall down. So if he falls down in front of Yaakov, if he's willing to say the Jewish people are really the primary, so that's why our pasuk says, you know why he's everywhere? You know why he's going to extend from Egypt all the way up to the north area, closer to like Syria, Iran, Iraq. How is he going to expand so far? Because he humbled himself to Yitzchak. So there are some commentators who want to learn it in a more positive way. But if you open up the Midrash does not seem to go in that direction. Because the Midrash says as follows. Says the Midrash, why the change in language? So it says, Kol zman she'Avraham Avinu kayam yishkon. As long as Avram was alive, then the language is yishkon, he's going to dwell. Ukeshemet Avraham nafal. But when Avram dies, he's going to fall. Ad shelo pashat yado Beit HaMikdash, until Yishmael didn't touch the Beit HaMikdash, until he didn't wage war on the temple, yishkon, it's good language. Kevan she pashat yado, when he starts messing with the Beit HaMikdash, when he starts going after Al-Aqsa, he starts to wage a war, nafal, he's going to fall. And then it says, Ba'olam hazeh yishkon. In this world, he's going to be yishkon, good language, of alatid lavo, in the world to come, nafal, he's going to fall. So we see from this language that it's actually a lot more of a negative, that no, Yishmael is actually going to mess up. So whether he did teshuvah, or if he did teshuvah when Avram died, it's not going to last, or it's not going to last with his kids. Actually saw one of the commentators on the Midrash, what does it mean in the beginning, that once Avram dies, that's when he falls? Well, what does it have to do with Avraham? So they say, you know what happened? We saw that Avram is always fighting for Yishmael. He always feels so terrible about Yishmael. Ultimately, he's going to give in to whatever God God says, whatever Sarah Imenu says, but it was always painful for Avraham. Avraham was pleading for his son Yishmael. So the Etz Yosef writes on the Midrash, he goes, when Avraham died, we have what's called Zechut Avot. We have the merit of our forefathers. The Zechut of Avraham, as we say in the Tefillah, the Magen Avraham, the shield of Avraham applied to Yishmael as well, as long as Yishmael was alive. But once Avraham dies, he no longer had that Zechut of Avraham, and now instead we're going to go back to what Sarah, we're going to go to Sarah Imenu, because God said Sarah is right, and we're going to go to Sarah Imenu's Psak, her halacha, that we have to remove Yishmael and he has to be gone. I actually heard a different idea from Rabbi Khan. Rabbi Khan wants to say, what does it mean that after Avram dies, he fell? Maybe not necessarily that he lost the Zechut. Maybe it's not Avraham-centric. Maybe it's from Yishmael's perspective. We're going to learn in Parashat, we're going to learn this week's Parashat Toldot, that Esav tried to be this holy Jew to the best of his ability when he was younger, but the rabbis teach us that the day that Avram died, Esav went off the derech. Esav became bad. That was the day that he murders and he cheats, and Esav becomes an evil guy. When Avram dies. So someone explain, why does that happen? Because Avraham, with his love, his chesed, his kindness, was able to prop Esav up. But once Esav saw that his holy grandfather can't live forever, he reached a level of depression, and he said he can't make it on his own anymore. So Rabbi Khan says maybe this Midrash is saying the exact same thing about Yishmael, that Avram was one who always fought for Yishmael, and once Avram dies, Yishmael no longer had that protection. He felt there's no one there for me anymore. So now Yishmael himself is the one that's gonna go in Nafal and is gonna fall, and he's the one that's gonna now go into the bad direction because he felt out of depression. I don't have Avraham anymore, and this might also explain there's a Midrash that says that all the converts and all the followers that Avram had, they left by the second generation. They didn't stay on for Yitzhak. We spoke in previous years different reasons why they might have left, but maybe we can say, what does it mean they left? They left. Maybe who are the primary students of Avraham? It's Yishmael, Esav, and Yitzchak. So Yitzchak, he's going to make it. That's a Jewish people. But Yishmael and Esav, when did they go off? When did they leave? They leave. That's what it means. What does it mean that the students leave Avraham? It means that Yishmael and Esav, his two other sons, can no longer make it because they felt if the holy Avraham is not here to protect us, what's it all worth? And that's what takes place. Okay, fine. So it goes on. Then it says, if you mess with the Beit HaMikdash, and this is why the Midrash might be able to be read not just about Yishmael specifically, maybe Yishmael himself does do teshuvah, but maybe it's referring to his kids. That as long as his kids stay like their father at the end of his life and be good to the Jews and recognize their place, then everything is good. Then we have ourselves Yishkon. But if you go after the Beit HaMikdash, if you go after the temple, if you create whatever you call the Al-Aqsa flood and all these wars that you're taking, then nafal. Then we have over here, you're gonna fall. You can't make it. You want to extend and get all this territory and conquer? You have to know your place. You don't know your place, ultimately, says the Midrash, you're going to fall. And the Midrash closes off with the strongest statement. In this world, you might think it's all going to be okay. But in the next world, nafal. You're going to fall. Okay, but let's go back now to this language of nafal. There's another way to learn the idea of al kol pnei achav nafal, that he's going to fall in all of his brothers. So nafal might also mean that he's falling on people, he's really in everybody's face. Like we said from the angel, Yado Bakol, his hand is in everybody. He's driving everybody crazy. Al kol pnei achav nafal. Now, interesting, in modern Hebrew, we have all these rocket attacks. Rocket attacks are known as nefilot, as fallings. There was a nefilah over here. There was a nefilah over there. That we're saying over here that Yishmael causes the nefilot. He falls on everybody. If you open up Rav Shimshon Nafal Hirsch, he writes that the word nafal, to fall, is normally a weak word. The person who's weak is the one who falls. But he says sometimes in the Torah, we might find that word connotes something strength. It might connote someone falling on somebody else, where somebody who's the stronger one takes advantage of the weaker one because he falls on top of the weaker one with all of his strength. And he actually quotes an earlier pasuk, which now we're going to get to our real Dvar Torah. He quotes back an earlier usage of the word when we go back to when the world was so evil. Right before Noah, the world got so evil that Hashem has to destroy the world. The people back then were known as the Nefilim, the people who fall. So he says, why are they called the Nefilim, the fallers? What are they falling on? He says, they're falling on all the other people with the raping and pillaging and all the terrible stuff that they're doing. They're falling on everybody. They're stealing. They're doing terrible things. They're called Nefilim. And in that case, the word Nefilim is coming from a place of the strong attacking the weak, the strong taking advantage of those who can't protect themselves. And ultimately, the punishment is going to be the flood in the entire world. So what we're saying here is that Yishmael has that same trait as those people before the flood who attacked the weak. So already we're beginning to see this connection between Yishmael and those who did Hamas is already coming up in this pasuk of the word nafal. But then I found the connection, the straight Yishmael Hamas connection in the words of the great mystic known as the Megaleh Amukot. Says the Megaleh Amukot, this is on his Perush in Ba'alotecha. So he says, Yishmael, when it comes to Yishmael, and this is a deep mystical idea, I don't fully understand what the words mean, but I'm going to just say it over because I think there's enough in there that we can get our idea. It says, Yishmael, Gam et ze leumat ze asa Elohim. There's a principle, ze leumat ze, God created. God created a yin and yang. This compared to that, there's certain connections between two things. The who, and what is this connection between Yishmael and something else? He says, V'hu al penei kol echav nafal, ki hu misitra de nefilim asher ni'u ba'aretz. He says, the pasuk says by us, al kol penei echav nafal, he's going to fall on all of his brothers. That is connected to, he is part of the Sitra de Nefilim. He comes from the aspect, from the side of the Nefilim. So the Megillah Mokot says on the spiritual level, the spiritual source of Yishmael takes us back to the evil Nefilim that caused the destruction of the world in the times of Noah. Okay, now who were those Nefilim? Okay, now we'll do a little bit of background, a little bit of mystical background, and let's go back to the end of Parashat Bereshit, right before Noah. And the pasuk over there says that mankind, Vayiki achela Adam larov, mankind became much greater, and he starts taking over the whole world. Ubanot yuldu, and there were daughters. All of a sudden, the daughters are here. And then it says, Vayir'u b'nei Elohim et benot ha'adam. And the b'nei Elohim, the child of the divine. Now, who are the b'nei Elohim? A lot of ink has been spilled, and there's many approaches. We're going to go in one very specific track in a second. But these b'nei Elohim, Elohim means the Almighty. So these the children of the Almighty, these strong divine beings. Is it mankind? Is it not mankind? We'll see in a second. They saw that the women looked very pretty. Kitovotena, they look pretty. Vaychu lehem nashim, and they took wives. And from the connotation of what's going on over here is they weren't asking. There wasn't like a date happening before. They just took whatever they wanted. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks around and he says, "Whoa, this is not so good. Mankind shouldn't last for too long, only for about 120 years." And then it says, "HaNefilim hayu ba'aretz b'imamem." The Nefilim were around in this generation, and they came on top of these women, and basically they made a lot of problems. It sounds like they were stealing and raping and doing terrible things. And then the pasuk says, "Vayara Adonai ki dabara ata adam ba'aretz," and God now saw how wicked, how evil man could be, and that our yetzer hara, our evil inclination, is so strong all the time. And then it says that Hashem was so upset that He created the world. But then it says there was a guy named Noah. And Noah did a really good thing, and now the parsha switches over to Parshat Noah, and it says that Noah has a bunch of kids, and then it says Vatishachet ha'aretz lifnei Elohim. But then the land became corrupt before God, Vatimela ha'aretz Hamas, and there was lawlessness, there was violence in the world. So that's the Hamas story early on. That you have these Bnei Elohim and these Nefilim. So the mystical commentators come along, and they explain, who are these children of the divine? Who is it referring to? So they learn that it's actually referring to angels. Angels that came down to earth, because the angels were kind of like messing with God when they saw that mankind wasn't so good. So what are they doing? These divine images aren't so good. So Hashem sent them down, and and those different versions. Either they were sent down, either they're the Nephilim who came down, the fallen angels, or their kids that they produce are the fallen angels, are the Nephilim. But these two angels are sent down, and God says, "You think it's so easy for mankind? But you think that the evil inclination is so easy to conquer? Let me send you guys down." And two angels are sent down. One's name is known as Uzzah, and the other one is Azael. Uzzah is also called Chazael in another different place, but they're known in the main sources as Uzzah and Azael. Now, I want to make a side point. You don't have to accept this. This is like might be a little bit far out there, but an idea that I was thinking about. In this war with the Palestinians have been broken up right now, and we keep hearing the word Gazans. Now, Gazans in Hebrew is Gaza is Aza. So we have the Azans in Hebrew. And I'm beginning to notice all these Divrei Torah coming up about what is Gaza, where is Gaza, how does the halachas of Gaza work. Actually, I heard an unbelievable idea that, where do we find Gaza most clearly in the Navi? In the story of Shimshon, of Samson. If you remember the story of Samson being taken captive, and then with his last bit of strength, he brings down the building with all the Philistines inside the building, killing himself, but killing all the enemies at the exact same time. And, if somebody wants to say, history repeats itself, all the buildings that are being destroyed. Like, we don't really find in the Torah so many stories of really collapse of buildings. Where is that one story in the Torah? In the story of Shimshon, in Samson, in Gaza, in Aza. Okay, fine. But let's go back to our angels. So one angel we said is Uzzah, and the other one is Azael. But Uzzah, it's spelled Maleh. It's spelled with the Vav in one place, and that's why he's known as Uzzah. But in many other places, the Vav is missing. It's just spelled Ayin, Zayin, Aleph, which you would pronounce without the Vav as Azah. And really, the Aleph at the end could be replaced with a Hey. When you go from Aramaic, the sources are in Aramaic, and you come back to Hebrew, the Aleph becomes a Hey. That's Gaza. Meaning Aza, it is, again, take it or leave it, but the idea of Aza could be one of these angels. And we know that Chazal tell us, you want to know the tikkun, you know how to fix the sins of this Uzzah and Azael and what they did to all these women and to all these people. The fixing is what takes place on Yom Kippur when we take the goat and we throw him to Azazel. Azazel is taking the Azza and the Azael, putting them together. The Uzzah and the Azael becomes Azazel, this jaggedy cliff where you throw off the goat, the Seir Azazel. That becomes the Yom Kippur service, is the tikkun to fight against these angels. Okay, so whether you want to say it relates to Gaza or not, that's a side point. But the commentators say that the Nefilim, the ones who are fallen, are either the angels or the children of these angels are known as the Nefilim, and they're the ones that make all the big problems, which ultimately leads to what's known as Hamas. Says the Megala Mukot that we said a second ago, Yishmael comes from these Nefilim. His source, his spiritual source, Yishmael, are these fallen angels. It's these Nefilim. Now let's look at the name Yishmael. What does Yishmael mean? Yishmael means Yishmakel, that Hashem will hear. So most of the time we learn it in a positive way, that Yishmael always prays. They pray 5 times a day. They bring down, and Jewish sources bring down that Muhammad, when he created Islam, he said, the Jewish people on their holiest day on Yom Kippur, we mentioned Yom Kippur a second ago, on Yom Kippur, what do? They pray 5 times a day. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to pray every single day 5 times a day. We're going to add a Musaf and we're going to add a Ne'ilah every single day. We're going to pray 5 times a day. So Yishmael means God hears him. He's listening to his prayers. But then there's a different midrash that says Yishmael actually is that Hashem will hear us, that Yishmael is going to make us cry out of so much pain. This enemy of the Jewish people in the future is going to do so much problems to us that Hashem is going to hear us cry out. So their name signifies not their praying, but our praying, because of how bad it's going to get. Okay, that's a little bit more scary. But let's get back to the idea of the fallen angels. So how is Yishmael Bayasa fallen angels? So let's go to a wild midrash, Pirkei Rabbi Lezer in Perik Kaf, says as follows. Amar Bil'am, the evil prophet Bil'am says as follows. From the 70 languages or the 70 nations that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mishivim Lashonot, Shebrab HaKadosh Baruch Hu Be'olamo, from the 70 nations that Hashem created in the world, Lo Sam Shemo Le'echad Mehem. Hashem did not give his name to any of them. He didn't add his name to any of the nations. Ela LeYisrael. Only to the Jewish people. The name El is one of God's names. Our name, Yisrael. Whenever you have angels, always have El at the end of your names. Michael, Gavriel. We are Yisrael. We're like the angel of God. So we're the only nation of the 70 to get the name. And the Midrash says, hold up. It's not so clear. But since Hashem, Ho'il v'yishva HaKadosh Baruch Hu shemo shel Yishmael lishmo shel Yisrael. But since Yishmael's name is similar to ours, meaning Yishmael also has God's name. The only other nation to have God's name, to have Kel in his name is Yishmael. So then he says, Oy mi yichyeh b'yamav. Woe unto anybody who will be in the generation of Yishmael, because it's going to be so difficult. Yishmael is going to make it so difficult because God's name is in his name as well. Or as we're trying to say, Yishmael's name is also an angel name, and that's what makes him so dangerous, because we have ourselves a war against the fallen angels, a war against the Nefilim. But Bezrat Hashem, let's close off on a positive note. Let's close off on a good thing, and let's get to this week's parasha, Parashat Toledot. So if last week's parasha ended off al penei kol echav nafal, that Yishmael is going to fall on top of all of his brothers, he's just going to be everywhere. But then says the Balaturim, the very next verse is the first verse of our parasha. Ve'ele toledot Yitzchak, and these are the offspring of Yitzchak. Meaning our parasha starts off, then now we're going to move off. Yishmael is now pushed off to the side, and now the Jewish people, we're going to talk about our offspring and our children. So says the Balaturim, Ve'samichle, why is our parasha juxtaposed? Why is it right next to, why is it following the story of Yishmael? Lomar, to teach us. Yishmael, when Yishmael will fall, when Yishmael will be nafal, in the end of days, when Yishmael is going to have the nafal, as Rashi told us based on the midrash, that in the end of days he's going to be nafal, he's going to fall. Then Ben David, then the Mashiach will come, who comes from the Toldot Yitzchak, and that's why our parasha starts off right afterwards to tell us once there's a nafal with Yishmael, then Yitzchak is going to rise. The Jewish people are going to step it up. Shabbat Shalom.